let's have a look at some recent fires. So just last week, of course, the beautiful mountain town of Jasper, Alberta, experienced horrendous wildfire, which tore through the town, destroying about a third of the structures. They evacuated the town 2 days ahead of time, but there's a lot of questions because with 2 days notice, they weren't able to deploy any resources to save the town, which is like a jewel. It's a beautiful tourist spot, high revenues for not just the Alberta government, but the town and, many people in that region.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Climate Emergency Forum. My name is Regina, and I'm your host. And today we've got Smokin Hot Summer 2024. And let me tell you, everyone, the heat is on. It is intense. Last week, Secretary General Antonio Guterres made a blistering statement on the increasing incidence and intensity of heat waves that we are currently facing. Billions of people are facing an extreme heat epidemic, billions, wilting under increasingly dead heat waves, with temperatures topping 50 degrees Celsius worldwide. For those of you who live in the States, as I do, that's about 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And by the way, it was mentioned in Secretary General's speech that is halfway to boiling. The consequences are profound. Heat has closed schools in Asia, Africa, entire continents. This has impacted more than 80 million school children. Some of the Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 4, deals with education, and we cannot pursue these Sustainable Development Goals with this runaway heat. It just is not possible when you have 80 million children missing school. How are they going to obtain a quality education? Much less a quality education on climate change that is supposed to help bring about solutions in this situation that we've got ourselves in. It's really, really bad. Heat is estimated to kill about 500,000 people a year. 500,000 people every year due to heat. And one of the places that's really in danger because of heat is where it's most important, where humans congregate, and that is our urban cores, our cities. They're heating up twice the global average. And why is that? You have buildings made of concrete, reflecting glass, sidewalks. There's not enough greenery to absorb the heat and cool the air. So it's just stifling hot. This week is July 30th, as we're doing this recording, 2024. We're going to see more of the same in the United States. By midweek, parts of the eastern and western United States could experience record warm afternoon highs and lows. And in about 24 states, that's half of the nation, there are areas where the heat risk could be extreme level. One thing that I find unbelievable is that this past Monday, we're recording on Tuesday, this past Monday marked 64 days in a row of 100 degrees or higher in Phoenix. Is that sustainable? Absolutely not. Building needs to stop right away. There's not enough water. Anyone who moves to Phoenix is going to have to air condition their homes, their cars continually. It's not sustainable. It's not responsible. It's not good stewardship for the planet. As we all know, when there's more heat, there's more humidity in the air, more moisture in the air, so that these rain bombs are so much more extreme. And I want to point out the most recent catastrophe, this hot off the presses, that is the landslides in southern India, in Kerala, a beautiful, beautiful place. I've always wanted to go there. Very well known for its wildlife, its rustic villages. It has been slammed. It has been slammed. Days and days of intense rain in this region has made it so bad that the government officials call it one of the worst natural disasters, one of the worst calamities that Kerala has ever witnessed. This, my friends, is what is brought about by high heat. And I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Paul. Paul, what do you have to say on the subject of heat?
Yes, so 500,000 people dying per year from heat. That's actually probably a very conservative figure because in many cases, somebody might be exposed to the high extreme heat, high humidity, and have a heart attack or have a stroke, and their deaths are attributed to the heart attack and stroke, and they're not counted even in the heat numbers, which is a root cause, so they definitely should be. So the counting is off. That's probably a conservative estimate of the number of people. The only bigger killer really is air pollution, which is like 8 to 10 million people per year. Let's have a look at some recent fires. So just last week, of course, the beautiful mountain town of Jasper, Alberta, experienced horrendous wildfire, which tore through the town, destroying about a third of the structures. They evacuated the town 2 days ahead of time, but there's a lot of questions because with 2 days notice, they weren't able to deploy any resources to save the town, which is like a jewel. It's a beautiful tourist spot, high revenues for not just the Alberta government, but the town and, many people in that region. Last year, of course, Canada had record numbers of fires. This year, is still ongoing. We're getting lots of fires. Last year was record numbers for Canada. The hectares burned was about 4 to 5 times higher than normal. Of course, we know about the wildfire smoke going down to, major US cities and affecting a lot of people, right? A lot of bad air. And I was just saying that air pollution is the biggest killer on the planet. And these fires actually produce black carbon particles that are coated in organic material that was burned, probably things like tree sap, etc. So not only are they more harmful to human health, the particles from these large wildfires, but there is a phenomenon called Pyrocumulonimbus clouds, where you get these massive storm-like clouds, which actually bring the fire particles up into the lowest parts of the stratosphere, where they affect the temperatures up there because they're absorbing sunlight. So they're causing warming of the upper troposphere, lower stratosphere. They're affecting ozone levels. They're affecting a lot of different factors, global factors on wind circulation, et cetera. So it's not just the fires themselves that are affecting people on the ground, but they're affecting the whole atmospheric column. Prior to 2023, we had, of course, we had the Maui, Hawaii massive fire, which roared through the town, causing tremendous numbers of casualties, incinerating cars, etc. No warning, really. Very, very rapid moving fire. At least Jasper, no casualties were experienced. They got the people out. Back in 2021, there was a Lytton, British Columbia fire, which was another massive fire, which went through and destroyed the town of Lytton, British Columbia. Almost no warning. People got out of the town very, very quickly, just hours before the fire incinerated the town. Of course, we had the Paradise Fire in 2018, which destroyed that town, and that was a transmission line, sparking, high winds. Almost no warning. Loads of people died. And then before then, we had Fort McMurray in 2016, which destroyed a lot of the town of Fort McMurray. At the time, people were saying karma, it's a huge oil town destroyed by wildfire, exacerbated by climate change, but nothing was done by the Alberta government. In fact, since that fire, they slashed firefighting budgets about 30%, the government of Alberta. So the politicians are full of thoughts and prayers for people in these towns, but they unfortunately don't do anything to prevent them. An interesting paper came out in April 23rd, 2024, by the author Brian Shoddy et al. And it's about using AI to try to predict what wildfires are going to do. Wildfires are complex, right? Depends on the soils, grass, shrubs, trees, how moist or dry they are, the underlying soils, peak permafrost. So there's very complex chemical reactions going on with fires that generate the heat, and they also generate their own wind. And of course, the topography is very important. The weather is very important. If it's moist, a lot of water vapor in the air, fires don't spread that quickly. If the area is very dry, then the fires can move very rapidly. In fact, the Jasper fire was reported to be about 100 meters or 300 feet high wall of flame moving through the town. So these fires are highly complex, chaotic, highly nonlinear processes are involved, and it's tough to model. What they've done, this research group at USC, University of Southern California, they've generated an AI model using data from satellites looking at all fires in the last number of years, how the fires started, how they spread, how quickly they spread, how intense they got, how many hectares they burned. They put all that data, satellite data, into the wildfire models, and they use the AI to try to predict where the fires are moving this year. So they're actually using this in California, but the authors of the paper say that this could be used anywhere to try to predict what fires are going to do. So it could become a great tool in the toolbox of people trying to fight these fires. But, we're certainly not doing enough. Especially, look at Canada. We knew 2 days ahead of time. We knew 48 hours ahead of time the fire was heading to Jasper, Alberta. We weren't able to do anything close to enough to stop that beautiful town from basically having a third of the buildings incinerated. The governments were basically impotent, the Alberta government, the Canadian government. They called in the military after the town had already burned down. So, we're not treating these things seriously as we need to. And they're only getting worse and worse as the temperatures go up. As the warming goes up and you get drying and the hydrological cycle is different, the risk is going way, way up for more and more of these fires.
Thank you so much, Paul. When you describe a 100-meter wall of flame, no living being can outrun that. Absolutely not. All you can do is just look up and accept your fate. It's a terrible, terrible fate that we're inflicting on so many living beings, and it's just terrible. With that, I'll turn it over to Peter.
So thanks, Regina, and thanks, Paul. I don't have that much to say because you really covered it very, very well indeed. Thank you for going through all those historic fires over the past few years, Paul. One thing I noticed, and I also noticed it trying to catch up with the latest research, have you noticed that every one of these massive events, there's no response in respect of demanding that the fossil fuel industry is phased out? Doesn't happen. We had this fire in Canada, right? 60,000 square miles of forest were burned. That just boggles the imagination. As far as I'm aware, nobody demanded that we should phase out the fossil fuel industry fast. When I read the reports, and there's some very good reports, UNEP in particular did a very long, good report 3 years ago. So you go through these reports, okay, and they recommend early warning, they recommend better response to the fires. They do not recommend stopping the fuel that's fueling these fires worldwide, which are fossil fuels. That doesn't get recommended. I just cannot believe it. Just to close up, I just want to say, if you go to the internet and try and find out whether the fires are increasing or not, you'll find it very confusing. You'll find data and graphs that show that nothing really much has happened. But you don't have to be confused because of this vast fire in Canada. That was definitely driven. All the scientists, everybody agreed that that was driven by this extreme heat way up in the far northwest territories, and the deep drought that's still going on up there. That drought has been going on for at least a couple of years, if not more now. One last thing as regards to research I should mention is to recommend the geography unit at the University of Maryland, who have this amazing tool using the satellites. You can get images by the week. You can see how much forest is being cleared by the year. And they can even distinguish the fire loss. You can even learn how much the fires are going. So my final point will be that nothing is more certain than if we continue to burn fossil fuels, and our governments and the fossil fuel industry and our banks are determined that we won't stop burning fossil fuels ever. There's nothing more certain than these terrible heat waves will continue to increase, they'll get worse, and the forest fires will get worse. I mean, really, our governments and corporations intend to basically burn down all the forests on the planet because they're all burning more, some a lot more than others, Latin America, for example, but they are all burning more now. So we're going to have to get out there and protest with all those young people. Actually, they're not all young. Some of them are old like me. So that's my final comment.
Thank you so much, Peter. We need everyone, young and old. We need all walks of life out there protesting. This is not a niche issue. This is a life issue. So yes, thank you. We all have to be out there protesting. I mean, the far-reaching impacts of extreme heat, which causes extreme flooding, which is made worse by eroded forests, burned down forests, it can't be overstated. Right. So, wildfires, they can lead to the loss of native vegetation that is essential for the various animals who live there to survive. They can also cause soil erosion. And then, of course, water runoff, leading to more flooding. These things don't happen in a vacuum. There's just one thing after the other. One of the things, too, is that wildfires can impact the water quality. So this could lead for algal blooms, oxygen depletion. The main impacts of wildfires, habitat loss. This can cut off travel for travel corridors for various species. And this can be, and make it very hard for animals to find prey as well as mates. It can also transition forest to scrubland. It just becomes a vast scrubland. So there's so many different things. Even the very soil itself changes its composition and is less able to withstand the various onslaughts that climate change can bring its way. I'm going to hand it back to Paul.
Yeah, so there's a lot of compounded problems that we're seeing. For example, not only has climate change caused great increases in temperature and humidity and caused extended droughts, drying out trees, weakening them, but also it hasn't been cold enough in winters to kill the pine beetle, which used to be killed in very cold winters. Now they're not, so they can spread much more quickly in our warmer world. And these pine beetles have massacred pine trees and other coniferous trees. And these dead trees are perfect fuel for these massive fires that we're seeing, allowing them to spread much faster. There's just so much material available to be combusted. So what can we do about it if you're a homeowner and you're in, a town like Jasper, or, think of Banff, I guess. Banff is very, very high risk. Another gorgeous mountain town. So what can people do in these places? Well, I guess we'll see what happens when they rebuild Jasper, and they will rebuild it because people are wealthy there. It's in Alberta. They'll get money from the Alberta government, from the federal government. Most people have good insurance at the moment there. So they'll rebuild. A third of the town is gone. They'll rebuild. Probably within 2-3 years, you won't notice there was a fire there because I think lots of money will pour in. But how will they rebuild? Will they just rebuild the same type of houses? That's the question. If they do, they haven't learned a single thing, have they? If they rebuild and make stone walls, use metal roofs, maybe even have some earthen homes where half of the home is under the ground, the other half is above, fireproof the building, have electric pumps, have hoses on the roof and sprinkler systems to give the house a fighting chance to not burn down again if the same sort of fire comes through, water cisterns in the basement or a nearby pond, perhaps. And also, it remains to be seen how the insurance companies will respond. The government could legislate insurance companies to require that when you rebuild new homes in a fire-prone area, that you do use some of the techniques I've been discussing to make sure any new home built is fireproof as much as possible. The other thing is we need to really think about the model of, a fire's a few days away, we tell the town to evacuate, right? What if instead the people in the town had mandatory firefighting training? 90% of the firefighters in Australia, for example, are volunteer firefighters. They have training, they have equipment, they know how to use the equipment. If a wildfire is coming their way, the town doesn't all completely evacuate. The people can stay and they can defend their properties and quite safely fight these fires. Instead of what we do is just run as quickly and as fast as possible, evacuate the whole town, just leave it for the fire to burn down. And then after the fires burn down the town, then we call in the military, the politicians all say thoughts and prayers, and let's rebuild. I mean, that it's absurd, really, when you think about it. We're acting like we have no agency to fight these fires. We're just sacrificing towns in this onslaught, and I think this is absurdly ridiculous in today's day and age.
Thank you, Paul. I couldn't agree more. It's absurdly ridiculous this day and age, and it needs to stop. I agree with everything we said, except for one thing, Paul. I think fire-resistant housing is very, very important. But now, if we know that an area is prone to wildfires, I kind of disagree with the idea of building there in the first place. Other than that, I'm completely on board with everything you said.
What we did 100 years ago is we just cut down all the forests. That reduced wildfires significantly. Some of the wildfires in like 1825, New Brunswick, the Miramichi fire, it burned 1.2 million hectares. 1845, an Oregon fire, it burned 0.6 million hectares. I mean, those were massive, massive fires above and beyond the scale of what we're seeing today, simply because we had a lot more forest that could burn, with all of the clear cutting and division into subdivisions. At least that's reduced the limit of wildfires a bit.
That makes good sense, Paul. Thank you for adding that. So, Peter, can you share us some more of your thoughts about this wildfire fiasco we've got going on this summer?
Yeah, I could just make a little bit of a complementary addition to what Paul explained on the history. Is absolutely right. So as I say, if you go on the internet, you'll see that, oh, maybe they're not increasing, maybe they're decreasing. Everything changed in 2010. So just for the past decade, fires have been increasing everywhere. So I just want to leave you with that thought. And worldwide, since 2010, they've been increasing at a very rapid rate, as I mentioned before, largely due to Latin America, which includes the Amazon, of course. But yeah, it's very, very definite now. The planet's being burnt down.
It's also spiking CO2 levels. If you look at the rise of CO2 levels in over the last year, they're very, very high. And if you look at where that CO2 is coming from, there is a lot coming from wildfires around the planet. There also seems to be a failure of the sinks that capture carbon on land, particularly in the Amazon rainforest and also in some Asian countries. The Earth is basically absorbing less CO2 than it did previously, and that's why CO2 levels in the atmosphere are starting to spike. If this is a long-term trend starting, then it's extremely concerning, and climate change will greatly accelerate. If it's just a glitch, a one-year thing, then it's not so bad. If it's not a regular pattern, but I fear that that's not the case. I think it's the start of a long-term trend. I mean, the California fires, they're threatening Paradise, which was burned down in 2018, and they're massive fires. Like there's a fire in California larger than LA right now.
Yeah, but that's arson. Do we really want to touch on that? Because
well, it's a wildfire. The ignition source could be lightning, could be human caused, whatever the source is. It doesn't really matter. The net result is the forest burns down.
I know,
and
but
actually, Paul, this is what the media are saying. They're saying, okay, it was started by arson, but it's because of the tinder and dryness and heat that it's just going crazy. So that's a good response from the media, at least. And also, like I was talking to Charles and Heidi about, yeah, California for sure, but all of Western North America pretty well burning, and really, really badly up on that northwest corner of the United States. The fires in Oregon are absolutely astounding, and the media is not giving us a whole lot of information on that, but it's massive, it's huge.
Also, the authorities want to repopulate Jasper and get it on its feet as soon as possible, but they have no date as to when people can go back, because it's getting hot and dry again, and there's still fires in that area, and they're very concerned about fires revisiting the town. So they're creating all kinds of fire breaks by having controlled burns to create kind of fire breaks. And they've also set up a sprinkler system on some of the roofs to try to create fire breaks that way. Of course, it's all after the fact, right? It's all too little, too late.
Yeah.
You know, surely we can do some of these things before a town burns down. You know, we need to protect some of our small towns. We can't just evacuate them and let them leave it to the whims of chance, you know, for fires heading in that direction.
But I read that Danielle Smith diverted some of the fire protection resources to protect the tar sands.
Yes, there's the Trans Mountain pipeline goes through Jasper. So there was a lot of firefighting resources as the town was burning to go and protect the pumping stations. There's 890,000 barrels of oil that go through that pipeline per day. It brings so much money to the Alberta government and fuels the fossil fuel industry. And that was a priority for the Canadian government, the Alberta government, the firefighters to protect, as opposed to actual houses and structures. They protected the hospital, they protected some water pumping stations, the library, some commercial buildings at the expense of sacrificing houses that they could have tried to protect because they just didn't have enough resources there. I mean, the military was only called after all of this had happened, right? It's just, I mean, how about maybe calling the military when the town's evacuated and say, protect this town, right? I mean, we're just so stupid as a society. You know, in the face of what climate change is doing.
Yeah, and thank you everyone once again for being with us. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about zoning in terms of building this housing that can resist wildfires, training people so that they can respond and save their homes? Or what are your thoughts about what Peter said? You know, why aren't we protesting out there every time there's a wildfire? Why are there no protests? If there were, would you join? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this and if you think it would do any good. So please share in the comments. And if you haven't, subscribe. We'd love to have you part of the Climate Emergency Forum family. And of course, like and share the video, and we'll see you next time at the Climate Emergency Forum.